They ruled entire star systems. They engineered perfection. And when the monarch's son couldn't walk, they let him starve. 14 days without food. Surrounded by the galaxy's most advanced minds. Declared unworthy to live. Then a human doctor broke their law. Not with weapons. Not with fleets. But by doing the one thing their empire refused to do. He fed the child. What followed wasn't mercy. It was panic. Fleets mobilized. Ancient species watched. Because in that moment, the galaxy realized something terrifying. If stories where compassion challenges empires, where one human choice reshapes the fate of entire species, and where strength is measured by who we refuse to abandon, then subscribe. Because here, we don't just tell sci-fi stories. We tell the moments when humanity proves why the galaxy can't ignore us. Peace did not arrive with celebration. It came cautiously, like an injured creature testing whether the danger had truly passed. The throne world's defense grids powered down in stages, leaving behind a residual hum that reminded everyone how close destruction had come. Elias Ward felt the tension in every corridor he walked. Survival had been chosen, but acceptance lagged far behind. The Dominion shifted into something fragile. Ministries suspended outdated doctrines pending review. Councils splintered into reformists and preservationists, their arguments echoing across data channels. Change had exposed fault lines centuries old, and they did not seal quietly. Elias understood this well. Humanity had fractured many times while learning what it meant to protect its own. Prince Kextier recovered slowly but steadily. Assisted frameworks supported his movement while neural adaptations strengthened. Each small achievement rippled outward, magnified by political weight. Every twitch, every moment of alertness undermined generations of rigid belief. To some, the child represented hope. To others, an unforgivable crack in destiny. HFY-style summoned Elias privately at dawn cycle. The monarch stood overlooking the living city, towers glowing faintly as systems reset after crisis. "You have become impossible to ignore," HFY-style said. Elias joined him, gaze steady. "I never intended otherwise." The monarch angled his head slightly. "My empire now questions itself." Elias replied, "That's how survival starts." HFY-style studied the horizon. "There are those who will never accept my son," he said. Elias nodded. "There always are." The monarch continued, "They do not fear his weakness. They fear inheritance." Elias understood immediately. An heir shaped by compassion threatened power structures built on dominance. "Then they'll test him," Elias said. "Relentlessly." "They already have," HFY-style replied. "Petitions demand his removal from succession under revised doctrine." Elias frowned. "Publicly?" HFY-style nodded. "Quietly. Cleanly." Elias's jaw tightened. "You didn't fight a war to let them starve him politically." HFY-style turned toward him. "Then advise me." Elias paused, choosing his words carefully. "You can't force belief. But you can expose hypocrisy." The monarch considered this. "Explain." Elias gestured toward the city. "Make them confront what strength produces. Education. Stability. Loyalty. Let your son inherit proof, not permission." The next assembly convened under unprecedented conditions. Civil leaders, military commanders, scholars, and observers crowded the hall. Elias stood beside the monarch openly now, no longer hidden behind medical authority. Whispers followed him, a mix of resentment and reluctant respect. The prince's chamber feed displayed prominently, not as spectacle, but as presence. A senior preservationist stepped forward. "We acknowledge the heir's survival," it said. "But survival alone does not qualify rule." Elias leaned forward slightly. "Neither does destruction." The preservationist bristled. "This empire was forged through dominance," Elias replied, "and nearly shattered by it." HFY-style raised a limb. "State your objection clearly." The preservationist did not hesitate. A ruler must embody our ideal. The heir does not. Elias interjected calmly. Then your ideal is flawed. Murmurs rippled. You call tradition flawed? The preservationist snapped. Elias nodded. Yes. Traditions that cannot adapt kill the future they claim to protect. Data projections activated at Elias's command. These are outer sector loss estimates under old doctrine, he said. Self-inflicted fractures. Resource waste. Suppressed innovation. The numbers spoke ruthlessly. Silence spread. Elias continued. These occurred because deviation was erased instead of understood. The preservationist hissed. Correlation is not causation. Elias responded, repeated patterns are. He gestured toward the prince's vitals. You call this survival accidental. Yet your own data predicted collapse if rigidity persisted. The room shifted uncomfortably. Truth unsettled more than threats. A military commander spoke hesitantly. If the heir cannot command forces, Elias interrupted gently, then teach him strategy. HFY-style added quietly, I commanded without flying in my final cycles. Murmurs intensified. Precedent stacked. The preservationist pressed forward. Your son will invite constant challenge. Elias met its gaze. So did every leader worth remembering. The room stilled. The monarch straightened. My heir will inherit under revised doctrine, HFY-style declared. Competence shall define rule, not form. Outrage erupted instantly. Cries of betrayal. Appeals to history. Elias watched, heart steady. This was necessary chaos. Then, something unexpected occurred. A junior delegate from a minor sector spoke up. If strength is measured by endurance, it said cautiously, then the heir has already endured more than any candidate. Silence followed. Agreement spread cautiously, like light across frost. The preservationist retreated slowly, arguments losing traction. HFY-style concluded the assembly. The matter is decided. Dissent remains lawful. Sabotage will not. Authority settled, altered but intact. Later, Elias sat beside Kextier, watching the child struggle through assisted motion. Every effort was deliberate, determined. Elias smiled faintly. You're teaching an empire patience, he whispered. The child responded with a soft chitter, eyes bright with focus. Outside the chamber, whispers turned to discussion. Discussion to planning. Some plotted resistance. Others planned reform. Change spread not through victory, but inevitability. Elias stood at the threshold, understanding the truth with quiet certainty. Empires did not collapse when challenged. They collapsed when they refused to grow. And humanity had once again become the catalyst. Resistance did not announce itself with fleets or declarations. It grew quietly, threaded through bureaucratic delay, procedural obstruction, and carefully worded concern. Elias Ward recognized the pattern immediately. Humanity had seen it countless times. When power lost certainty, it clung to complexity like armor. The prince's rehabilitation schedule slipped without explanation. Resources arrived late. Training frameworks malfunctioned just often enough to be inconvenient, never criminal. Each interruption carried plausible deniability. Elias tracked every anomaly, logging patterns others dismissed as coincidence. None were. HFY-style summoned Elias after the third delay. They obey the letter, the monarch said. Mandibles tight. And sabotage the outcome. Elias nodded. Because open rebellion failed. This is quieter. The monarch's gaze hardened. I will not rule through purges. Elias replied. You don't need to. Exposure works better. The next assembly convened smaller, operational rather than ceremonial. Department heads gathered reluctantly. Elias stood beside the monarch again, data already queued. The heir's delays correlate directly with infrastructure routed through preservationist oversight, Elias stated calmly. Not incompetence. Intent. Several officials protested simultaneously. Elias raised a hand. Documentation contradicts you. Projections illuminated the chamber. Redirected supply chains. Reassigned personnel. Maintenance cycles adjusted just enough to slow progress. Elias spoke evenly. You followed policy. You violated purpose. A senior administrator bristled. Purpose is subjective. Elias responded instantly. Outcomes are not. The administrator hissed. You assume malice. Elias shook his head. I confirm resistance. Silence followed. The monarch observed closely, letting the truth speak without decree. After the session, Elias returned to the prince's chamber. Kextier struggled against the mobility rig, frustration evident. Elias knelt beside him. You're being slowed on purpose, he said softly. The child tilted his head, processing tone rather than meaning. Elias continued. That doesn't make you weak. It means you matter. Kextier's mandibles clicked faintly, effort renewing. The first real threat came 2 cycles later. An anonymous transmission reached Elias's console, stripped of origin markers. The message was brief. Withdraw support. Leave the Dominion. Survival depends on silence. Elias stared at the words without surprise. He forwarded the message to HFY-style immediately. The monarch read it, then looked up slowly. They threaten extinction? Elias shook his head. They threaten narrative collapse. That scares them more. HFY-style dismissed the guards. If harm comes to you, he said quietly, I lose legitimacy. Elias met his gaze. If harm comes to the heir, you lose the future. The monarch nodded once, understanding passing between them. Security protocols tightened subtly, not to intimidate, but to remove opportunity. Elias appreciated the restraint. Fear bred martyrs. Transparency bred accountability. The preservationists adjusted tactics. Public forums filled with rhetoric about stability, unity, and cultural erosion. Elias attended several, standing unguarded among hostile listeners. You bring human disorder, one speaker accused. Elias replied calmly. You mistake adaptation for chaos. Another hissed, Our empire thrived without your influence. Elias answered, It nearly tore itself apart resisting reality. Debate turned sharp, but not violent. That restraint frustrated opponents more than outrage would have. Elias knew this well. They needed him reckless. He remained steady. Then came the attempted transfer order. A mid-level official authorized temporary relocation of the heir for environmental optimization. Perfectly legal. Completely false. Elias intercepted it minutes before execution. They're trying to isolate him, Elias told HFY-style. Make progress invisible. The monarch's response was immediate. Cancel all discretionary authority. Centralize succession oversight. The decision sparked outrage. Accusations of tyranny flooded channels. Elias watched reaction metrics spike, then plateau. Anger burned fast. Accountability burned longer. Kextier's training resumed without obstruction. Progress accelerated visibly. Each gain stripped another layer of credibility from opposition claims. The child adapted differently than expected, compensating through cognitive planning rather than physical dominance. Elias observed sessions with quiet pride. You're learning your own shape, he murmured. That's harder than copying anyone else's. The anonymous transmissions returned, harsher this time. Threats escalated from removal to consequence. Elias ignored them. Silence denied leverage. The tipping point came during a public symposium on inheritance doctrine. A preservationist extremist lunged forward, breaching containment, aiming a disruptor toward the prince's chamber. Security reacted instantly. The attacker was subdued before discharge. Panic rippled. Elias did not move. HFY-style addressed the assembly immediately. This act confirms sabotage, the monarch declared. Not dissent. Images of the attack spread across the Dominion within minutes. Sympathy shifted rapidly. Resistance lost its mask. Later, alone with Elias, the monarch exhaled slowly. I underestimated their desperation. Elias replied, change feels like annihilation to those built on certainty. The monarch nodded. What happens now? Elias answered, now they either adapt or fade. Kextier slept peacefully that night, unaware how narrowly catastrophe had missed him. Elias watched the steady rise and fall of the child's chest, understanding the cost of vigilance. Progress always invited backlash. That was the price of refusing to retreat. As dawn cycle light filtered through the chamber, Elias allowed himself a brief moment of rest. Resistance had shown its shape. Predictable, finite, and vulnerable to the one thing it could not survive. Exposure. Cliffhanger. Dominion intelligence flagged coordinated preservationist cells activating beyond the throne world, preparing a final move. The intelligence brief arrived without ceremony, stripped of urgency only by the discipline of those delivering it. Elias Ward read the summary twice, then a third time, ensuring nothing had been missed. Coordinated preservationist cells. Multi-sector activation. Not rebellion yet, but preparation. Logistics, messaging, recruitment. The shape was familiar. Ideology hardening into movement. HFY-style studied the same data, mandibles tense. They are organizing quietly, the monarch said. Elias nodded. Because loud failures taught them caution. The monarch turned slightly. They will attempt legitimacy, Elias replied, or provoke overreaction. That was the danger. If resistance could frame reform as tyranny, they would win without firing a shot. Elias understood this intimately. Humanity's bloodiest conflicts often began with righteous fear masquerading as defense. The monarch convened an emergency advisory council, deliberately excluding hardline voices. Elias stood at the center, data projected around him like a map of intent. These cells are aligned by belief, not hierarchy, he said. Disrupt leadership and nothing changes. Address narrative, and momentum collapses. A commander frowned. Narratives are harder to kill than enemies. Elias met the gaze. But easier to expose. HFY-style leaned forward. You recommend patience while they mobilize? Elias shook his head. I recommend visibility. Let them speak. Let the Empire see what they truly want. Several advisors shifted uneasily. And if they incite violence? Elias answered calmly. Then they disqualify themselves. The monarch considered this. You ask me to trust restraint, Elias replied. I ask you to trust evidence. Authorization followed reluctantly. Surveillance loosened. Communication channels remained open. Preservationist rhetoric surged immediately. Calls for restoration. Appeals to heritage. Carefully chosen words masking an unspoken truth. Elias monitored sentiment curves in real time. Support peaked early, then leveled. Doubt spread quietly. Meanwhile, Kextier's progress continued. Assisted mobility sessions grew longer. Cognitive training advanced rapidly. The prince absorbed strategy with surprising clarity, mapping outcomes faster than expected. Elias observed one session silently. You see patterns, he said softly. The child tilted his head, mandibles clicking with effort. Elias smiled faintly. That matters more than legs ever could. The first public preservationist summit occurred 2 cycles later. Broadcast live across the Dominion. Elias requested attendance. Security protested. HFY-style permitted it anyway. They expect avoidance, the monarch said. Deny them that. The summit hall buzzed with fervor. Speakers invoked glory, continuity, the danger of softness. Elias waited patiently. When his turn came, he stepped forward alone. No guards. No authority symbols. Just a human in plain attire. You fear change, Elias began evenly. That's natural. Murmurs followed. But fear becomes tyranny when it decides who deserves existence. A speaker snapped, "You manipulate emotion." Elias nodded. "Because ignoring it built this crisis." He gestured toward the display. "Your doctrine produced stagnation metrics, internal fracture, and near civil war." Data scrolled dispassionately. "The air's survival did not cause instability. Your refusal to adapt did." Silence crept across the hall. A preservationist leader hissed, "You claim moral authority." Elias shook his head. "I claim survival authority. Yours failed." Gasps followed. Elias pressed on. "You want the past preserved because it doesn't question you. The future does." Broadcast sentiment shifted sharply. Viewers reacted in real time. Agreement rose where certainty faltered. The preservationist leadership stiffened, sensing momentum slipping. That night, the coordinated move began. Disruptions struck across infrastructure networks simultaneously. Power fluctuations. Data bottlenecks. Transportation delays. Enough to cause uncertainty. Not enough to justify emergency law. Elias watched the pattern unfold. "They're testing reaction thresholds," he told HFY-style. "If you strike, they escalate." The monarch nodded. "Then we don't strike." Instead, HFY-style issued a public statement. "We remain functional," he declared calmly. "Disruptions are being addressed transparently." The effect was immediate. Panic failed to materialize. Preservationist channels struggled to frame crisis where none appeared. Frustration drove recklessness. One cell attempted a data breach aimed at falsifying air progress metrics. The attempt was traced live and exposed publicly within minutes. Names surfaced. Affiliations linked. The narrative collapsed under scrutiny. "We didn't arrest them," a security officer reported incredulously. Elias nodded. "You didn't need to. Everyone saw them." Support for preservationist rhetoric plummeted. Funding dried up. Neutral systems distanced themselves. Cells fractured as members feared association. Momentum bled away quietly, exactly as Elias predicted. The final act came unexpectedly. A senior preservationist appeared on open channel, voice strained. "We sought to protect the Dominion," it said. "We failed." Elias watched without triumph. Only relief. Later, alone with HFY-style, Elias reflected quietly. "They were never evil," he said. "Just afraid." The monarch replied, "Fear nearly destroyed us." Elias nodded. "It often does." Kextier completed his first unaided balance exercise that cycle. The movement was small, imperfect, but self-directed. Applause echoed quietly through the chamber. Elias crouched beside him. "You're rewriting expectations," he whispered. The child looked up, eyes bright with effort, unaware of the empire shifting around him. As reports confirmed the disbanding of preservationist cells, the Dominion exhaled collectively. Not because conflict vanished, but because it no longer controlled direction. Change had weight now, and direction followed it. Elias stood at the balcony once more, watching the city glow with steady resilience. The future pressed forward, unafraid of weakness. Because weakness, confronted honestly, became strength. Cliffhanger: a delegation from Earth requested emergency transmission, bearing news that the transmission from Earth carried no dramatic music, no ceremonial greeting. It arrived raw, urgent, and human. Elias Ward recognized the tone before the message finished buffering. Something irreversible had happened. HFY-style authorized the channel immediately. The projection resolved into the face of Earth's Interstellar Council chair, lines etched deep from years spent negotiating survival among stronger powers. "Dr. Ward," she said, voice steady but strained, "your actions have accelerated something we can no longer contain." Elias felt the shift instantly. "Go on," he said. "Multiple civilizations have formally requested human mediation status," she continued. "Not alliance. Not consultation. Mediation." The word settled heavily. HFY-style attention sharpened. The chair continued, "They believe humans operate outside deterministic frameworks. That makes you trusted." Elias closed his eyes briefly. Humanity had never sought authority. It had merely refused to abandon conscience. And now that refusal echoed across stars. "You're asking for what, exactly?" Elias asked. "For you," the chair replied. "To remain here. As precedent. As proof." Silence followed. Elias understood immediately. His presence beside the heir had rewritten assumptions not only about power, but about humanity itself. Leaving now would fracture the fragile momentum. HFY-style spoke for the first time. "The human saved my son," the monarch said evenly, "and steadied my empire." The chair inclined her head slightly. "Which is precisely why others are watching." Elias looked toward the prince's chamber. Kextir lay awake, studying a projection of the city skyline, curiosity unburdened by fear. Elias exhaled slowly. Choices had consequences. So did departures. "I'll stay," Elias said quietly. "But not as an authority." The chair nodded. "As an example," she replied. "Yes." The transmission ended, leaving silence thick with meaning. Later, the monarch and Elias stood together overlooking the city. "Your species has been given influence without conquest," HFY-style said. "That unsettles many." Elias replied, "Including us." The monarch regarded him carefully. "Why did you choose to remain?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because leaving would look like retreat. And this wasn't a battle." Preparations began immediately. Formal accords drafted carefully to avoid dominance. Human mediators would serve temporarily, under invitation only. No fleets. No demands. Just presence. Elias knew how rare such trust was. How fragile. The final assembly of the Dominion convened under a different atmosphere than any before it. Less rigid. Less performative. More attentive. HFY-style addressed them with measured calm. "We have endured external pressure, internal fracture, and ideological threat," he declared. "We remain. Not unchanged, but alive." He gestured toward the prince's chamber feed. "My son will inherit not an empire of certainty, but one of responsibility." Murmurs followed. Not outrage this time. Consideration. The distinction mattered. Elias was invited to speak once more. He stepped forward slowly, aware this would be his last address in this capacity. "Empires don't fall because they protect the weak," he said. "They fall when they mistake cruelty for order." The room listened. Truly listened. Kextir's feed displayed quietly. The child attempted another assisted movement, steadier than before. Effort radiated determination. Elias smiled softly. "He doesn't need to prove strength," Elias continued. "He already endured what most never could." The assembly concluded without spectacle. No declarations of supremacy. No ceremonial absolution. Just acceptance that something fundamental had shifted. That evening, Elias sat beside Kextir alone. The child watched him intently. Elias spoke gently. "You changed a lot of lives," he said. "Without trying." Kextir reached out, resting a limb against Elias's sleeve. The contact carried trust. That was enough. HFY-style observed quietly from the doorway. "You will be remembered," the monarch said. Elias shook his head. "He will," Elias replied, nodding toward the child. "I just refused to look away." Reports from across the galaxy filtered in. Disputes paused pending human mediation. Doctrines reviewed. Minor powers hesitated before enforcing extinction-based policies. Not because humanity threatened force, but because it reminded them of consequence. Elias returned to the balcony one final time. The throne world pulsed beneath him, alive with continuity and change intertwined. He thought of Earth. Of fragile beginnings. Of a species that learned early survival meant standing between cruelty and silence. HFY-style joined him. "Do humans ever stop intervening?" the monarch asked. Elias considered this. "Only when someone else steps in instead," he replied. Below them, life moved forward. Not perfected, not purified, but enduring. Kextier's laughter echoed faintly from the chamber behind them, a sound once thought impossible. An empire's future, breathing freely. The galaxy would argue endlessly about doctrine, authority, and power. But one truth had already taken root, spreading quietly and relentlessly. Humanity did not conquer the stars. It taught them how to keep their souls.